Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody!
The energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, reppin' both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire, misunderstood. Hear 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city sand lights to the skyline greens, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. Rob hype on the mic, CP's the fire spark. Together they ignite, voices like the park. Fans dripped in jerseys, legacy bold. The Metropolitan story forever told. Turnstile spinning, the crowd floods the gates. This is family, no time for debates. Crack of the Batman, the roar never fades. Queens in the blood, it's how champions are made. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline gleams, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. 7-line swagger, vibes electric and wild. Mets legacy golden since I was a child. Orange crushed skies, let the battle ignite. We ride for the home team till the last fight.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets pregame show right here on the channels and on X. And we are talking about another New York Mets victory as they beat the San Diego Padres 8-3. And what a first two innings it was for the New York Mets. And if there was a team that needed it more than any other team, it was the New York Mets. And you know what, Chris? It's starting to look a little bit better. And we just talked about before we came on, Alvarez getting hit by that pitch. You saw how that team came together, and we talked about the camaraderie or lack thereof of this team. They showed it yesterday. What's up, buddy? Oh, I think you're on mute, Chris. I think your microphone's a little messed up.
Start the stream. Can you hear me now?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, cool. What a way to start this stream. Okay, well, I said that they came out laser focused, and the first couple of innings, the at-bats looked really good. They looked really locked in, and they were aggressive, as Nick and I talked about on the post-game stream last night. I know that you couldn't be a part of it, but we talked about how just, they came out attacking. That's pretty much the gist of yesterday, getting out to that 5-0 lead in the first inning. And then also the tandem of Clay Holmes and Sean Manaea going combined for the complete game. Bullpen is now rested for game 2. It was a really good showing from the New York Mets. They have to continue to build off of it. They cannot get complacent. 11 games left of the season. But that's, the last 2 games of the Alonso walk-off home run and also yesterday's 8-3 victory is something that this team can definitely build off of. So I was thoroughly impressed. I want to see more of the same tonight from this lineup, especially against another decent pitcher. I know that Michael King was and has been hurt for the better part of this season thus far. Nick Pivetta has been holding it down in that Padres rotation, but the game plan should not change. Do not change what's been working for you, especially against one of their better pitchers, if not their best pitcher. Be aggressive early in the count and take advantage of those fastballs that they leave for you. Jeff McNeil, 2 out, 2 RBI, double down the line where the Mets got the bases loaded. Vientos, double play up the middle, back to the pitcher, 1-2-3 double play. Kind of looked like it was going to deflate the inning a little bit after they got off to a 1-0 lead. And that's a backbreaker for a pitcher to get 2 outs after getting in a bases loaded, nothing out jam, and then surrendering a 2-out 2 RBI hit to Jeff McNeil. So really good job. Guys picking each other up. Manaea picking up Clay Holmes, who was only able to go 4, but that was part of the plan, as we talked about in yesterday's pregame. Yesterday was like a game where you say, okay, if we can replicate this, even a fraction of it, the next game and the game after that, we're feeling good about our chances to win or even sweep a series.
Yeah, it was a well-rounded game, and the Mets haven't had a lot of those over the last couple of months. But yeah, it was almost a perfect game. The way it just panned out and the way it happened. But, you're right about Jeff McNeil. I thought that was like probably the biggest moment of the game, because if you would have got out of that inning only scoring 1 run after the Vientos double play that got hit back to the pitcher, it would have been demoralizing. And you know, that usually gets a pitcher going. And we didn't want Michael King to get going because we know how good he can be. And that Jeff McNeil hit down the line to add those 2 runs in that inning, I thought was in to continue the inning was huge. I mean, who knows what would happen if the Mets didn't score more than 1 run in that inning? That would have been a backbreaker. And that is something that finally the Mets came through that they have been struggling with over the last like 10 games or so, especially offensively. But we did talk about also that if that Pete Alonso home run did have that momentum shift, and you hope that it continued into the Padres game, even though we had an off day on Monday, and it seemed like it did. So the good news is that the Mets won 2 in a row, and we finally beat a team that we've struggled with a lot. And that's good news when it comes to the New York Mets. And again, you talked about Nick Pivetta, how good he can be. And that's what you got to do against a guy like Pivetta is the same thing you did yesterday against Michael King. Be aggressive. They were aggressive. They did not take the fastballs down the middle like they have been over and over and over again. And they were aggressive. They were able to get big hits. And you just saw the way the lineup is. And the lineup is very similar, except for one guy. Vientos is not in the lineup today for whatever reason. And Marte is basically replacing him. And that's something that, we'll see how it goes. But it is nice to see that this is one of the better games they played in a while. And when you see how different they can be from just a couple of days ago when they couldn't get out of their own way to a game like yesterday, like you said, Chris, if they can replicate it, they're in good shape, because this is a team that you see what happens when you get solid pitching, not great pitching, but solid. And this was the design of the Holmes Manaea, piggybacking off each other. And you know what? Manaea just looks more comfortable coming out of the bullpen. Like he just does. I don't know what it is. Like his stuff was better. He looked more confident on the mound. And if this is the way it's going to stay with Holmes and Manaea, I'm okay with it. Like if you're going to pitch him again and it makes sense, and if it works out again, why not have one of those games where those two pitch in a possible playoff series? That is something that, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but obviously we're talking about that as we continue to be in a playoff spot. And we saw the Arizona Diamondbacks walk off yesterday, and they're kind of the biggest threat as of right now because of the tiebreaker situation, which is a little concerning. But again, we'll see how that goes overall. But I love the way the Mets played yesterday, and if they can just, again, teams make mistakes, but it just felt like a mistake-free game. And we talked about this many times on shows. If they limit the mistakes, they're very hard to beat as a team. But it starts with the pitching too. The pitching actually performed. You saved your bullpen, which is great because you might need it like a day like today. We have no idea what David Peterson's going to do, even though he was okay in his last start, but nothing special, Chris. So, you got your whole bullpen today, and that's the best case scenario for the New York Mets, as you got 9 innings between Holmes and Manaea.
Yeah, and I agree with you going back to the point of Sean Manaea. I mean, it just does look night and different from him coming out of the bullpen in this season over the handful of times that he's done so, going back to his first outing, in that Kansas City Royals series to end the first half before the All-Star break. So, if that's the recipe for success that they've identified, then so be it. I'm happy to do that. If that's what it takes for Clay Holmes to be effective, going 50 to 60 pitches, and only going 4 innings, 4 1/3, whatever, and then having Sean Manaea come in, I don't care. We're at the point of the season where we don't care how the Mets win games. We don't care how they get solid pitching. I don't care if you go 4 innings and you need a long reliever to come in afterward, get the job done. And that's what they did yesterday against a pretty formidable, pretty solid Padres lineup that can put runs up in a hurry if they really want to. A couple of times I was worried with Clay Holmes, issuing a leadoff walk, issuing a solo home run here, solo home run there. That's fine. He was able to limit the compounding mistakes. And I also think one of the best things that happened yesterday to save a couple of runs for the Mets was that double play up the middle with Francisco Lindor. We talked about that in the postgame show yesterday. If that play doesn't get made by Lindor and turned by, I believe McNeil's playing second base yesterday, then that's a 2-run, maybe even a 3-run home run that is coming up. And the game just changes from that point forward. So That's what we talk about when we have these pitchers on the mound that don't have high strikeout rates. Nolan McLean is the exception. The rest of this staff really is they're more so pitching to contact. Clay Holmes has a strikeout rate that's not exceeding 20%. So you can think of him as a contact pitcher. Same thing with the guy that's on the mound tonight and David Peterson. This defense has to make the plays, not only the routine plays, but with the way that this rotation is going, they have to make the plays that are a little bit harder than average is the best way that I can put it. They have to be spectacular to get the most out of these pitchers because there's going to be hard contact. When you are a contact pitcher, yeah, the name of the game is inducing weak contact, but that's not always possible and it's not always probable on some occasions. So make the plays, make spectacular plays, really get behind the pitcher, and you'll start to see this team gain a little bit more confidence over the last 11 games and try to carry that into a playoff berth should they get there. So a lot of stuff to pay attention to. I think that this David Peterson start tonight is going to tell us all that we need to know about his status in this Mets rotation come the playoffs, should the Mets make it there. We were having that discussion yesterday. I know that a lot of people think that there are not many other options outside of David Peterson. Brandon Sproat's going to be there. Kodai Senga's probably going to come up and be there and be an option. And then you have the duo that we saw last night perform really well, and Clay Holmes and Sean Manaea. Wouldn't be mad about David Peterson coming out of the bullpen like Sean Manaea does, but David Peterson has a chance to put that narrative to bed, that idea to bed with a good start tonight. Because you're right. All in all, in the second half, there have been some games where the numbers have skyrocketed, and it's been a little bit of a couple of outlier starts, I will say, for David Peterson, but he has not looked like the first half version of himself. Let's be quite honest about that. And the last couple of outings also have been, not bad by any means, but not the David Peterson that we've, come to know and expect over the past year and a half. The guy that's truly capable of going out there and delivering 6 to 7 solid innings, like we've seen on a handful of occasions this season. So I really look at, this game where the offense, you have a couple of adjustments. Like you said, Starling Marte is in the lineup. Alvarez, after getting drilled in the forearm, somehow is back in the lineup. Mullins, who actually hit a home run yesterday, back in that 9 spot with Tyrone Taylor still being hurt. The offense is going to show up even against a tough pitcher like Pivetta, I am sure. We talked about it yesterday in the pregame. We're not worried about this offense. That's the last thing that we're worried about. We're worried about rotation, and we're worried about the longevity of this bullpen. David Peterson, it starts with him tonight. With a rested bullpen, you still, at this point of the season, needing to prove something to this fan base and this team that you deserve to be in the rotation in a 3-game set in the wild card, you need to go out there and deliver 6 competent innings against the good Padres team. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. Like today with David Peterson, right? It's obviously a big test for him. He's kind of out of that circle of trust at the moment right now, because again, there's been conversation we had yesterday in regards to possibly him not even being on the starting any of the 3 games and being possibly in the bullpen, which is interesting to think about. But, because go back a month ago, people were talking about David Peterson being the number 1 starter. And obviously McLean, kind of was just getting into the groove of being a major league starter. But it is very interesting to see the dynamic of what's going on with the Mets pitching, because it's still a lot up in the air. And again, if David Peterson can show something, and again, great that our bullpen is 100% ready to go, even with the off day. So it's basically 2 straight days of them being off. You have, abundance of pitchers you can use today to help out David Peterson, because I think you can't mess around. And look, there's 11 games left. There's no room for error. If Peterson is struggling, you got to get him out as early as possible. You have a very, rested bullpen. Use your bullpen. You just have to. Because if you win today, you got the series win, and you go for the sweep tomorrow. And I think that's important. And, you got Jonah Tong tomorrow. Like, we don't know what we're going to get from him. He has not pitched well. So you can worry about that, tomorrow. But I really think that the first sign of trouble for David Peterson, I think you got to get him out of there. Use your trusted guys in your bullpen for, if you got to use 4 or 5 guys, they're rested, you might as well use them because you need to win. You don't want to go into a rubber game tomorrow and the possibility of Jonah Tong having to have another game like he did the last game or close to it, and you lose a series. You can't keep on, win 2, lose 3, win 2, lose 2. You can't keep on doing that. You got to go on a decent winning streak, even if it's like 4 or 5 in a row. It gets you going a little bit. It gives you, it hopefully will give you a little bit more room in a wild card spot as well. But I really think that when it comes to the overall pitching, I think the Mets are questioning everything like we are. Like I don't think they can put in pen what their rotation would be if the Mets do get into the playoffs. Because again, other than McLean, who do you really trust? And we talked about this many times with Clay Holmes being clearly the guy that they really like because he's been the guy that we talked about the bullpen for months and they would not do it. He's been the consistent guy in his rotation. And now that Manaea is kind of piggybacking off of him and being in the bullpen, they seem to like that duo clearly. And we all know when they like something, they're going to do it. And even if it doesn't perform extremely well next time out, I think they're going to be one of the two guys that are going to pitch in a start in this rotation if the Mets make the playoffs and are in a wild card series. So listen, David Peterson can change that. I'd rather have Holmes and Manaea in the bullpen in the playoffs and have a Peterson, McLean, and maybe somebody, maybe a Sproat in game 1, 2, 3. I think you can do that and have those guys in the bullpen. But I find it very hard to believe that they're not going to have both of those guys at least pitching together in a playoffs game at any moment because you're paying these guys over what combined this year $37 million and they're going to throw both of them in the bullpen. I find that very hard to believe.
You said the combination. What was the combination? One more time. I kind of lost.
The Holmes and Manaea combination.
Oh, okay. You know what though? I was just thinking about it. I'm not sure if this is feasible because of the roster number and whatever, and how many pitchers the Mets really plan to carry and what the plan is even for the playoffs. But, I wouldn't even be mad with Tong. We talked about this very topic yesterday on the pregame with the struggles of Jonah Tong. What do you do? Do you send him down in favor of Kodai Senga? Do you keep him around for the bullpen? I wouldn't be mad if they went ahead and, did a piggyback situation of Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong. You know what I mean? I don't care who starts the game and who comes in of relief. That's probably a question you have to ask both of them what they're more comfortable doing. But if Jonah Tong continues to, struggle, no fault of his own, he was rushed as all three of these guys were rushed clearly. But I wouldn't be mad at that situation either. Again, I'm not sure roster construction wise with the amount of rotation arms they want, with the amount of bullpen arms that you're allowed to have, given the rotation arms that you have, if that's feasible. But if it is on the table, if it is possible from the logistics standpoint, Sproat and Tong combination, just like Manaea and Holmes, wouldn't be the worst thing ever either. That's just my take on that.
Well, you also got to be careful when it comes to, the roster, the 26-man roster that you're going to have in the postseason, because you got to be careful because you got to make sure that you have the right guys in the bullpen as well, because you have to leave some guys out if you're going to have a ton of starters. Because the whole idea of a short series, especially a wildcard series, a 3-game series, is that, you got to set up your roster to the way, you can't put 6 starting pitchers on the roster because you're only playing 3 games or possibly 3 games. You got to be careful. Can you throw all those starters in the bullpen? I mean, it makes sense. Like, I wouldn't mind it if you got to do, Sproat Tong or Tong Sproat or, Holmes Manaea. I mean, if it works, it works. And then you have the abundance of bullpen arms available for whatever game you're throwing just one starting pitcher. That it's something to look at because it could be the best case scenario, especially for Senga, who might be coming back next week. That could be another, that's another guy that we have to talk about. Like, would they piggyback every starter in a postseason series? Like, it's possible. Like, I mean, after McLean, would you throw Senga in, or would you throw Senga first and then McLean? Like, they actually might do that, but I'd rather have McLean all by himself, to be honest with you, because I want him to control the game.
Oh, that's not a question. That's not a question. McLean's going by himself. I mean, even with what Patrick is saying, I mean, theoretically, Brandon Sproat could go by himself. But, if he does get into a jam, let's say in the 4th or 5th inning, and it's a playoff scenario and Brandon Sproat starting for you, I know over the first 2 starts he's looked good. But if you can go ahead and get somebody else in there, And, there also was, I guess, some question marks about his innings before he even got the call up, anyways, that we talked about this before he got the call up on the channel and all of our streams. Why wouldn't you go ahead and do that? But, if you don't want to do that, if you think that Brandon Sproat looks the part and the Mets front office deems that to be the case, then Kodai Senga is a perfect candidate as well. You know what I mean? He comes back, gives you 4 solid innings, and then you go and put a guy like Jonah Tong in there. I'm just saying, from Jonah Tong's perspective, in order to not send him down, because I think we both agreed yesterday that at this point, he's already up. There's no sense, even though he's struggling as a starter, there's no sense in sending him down. It doesn't really make sense at this moment. If he needs to get an inning, 2 innings of work out of the bullpen, I think that he's fully capable of doing so, especially with his arsenal and not really developing that elite third pitch, or not even an elite third pitch, quote unquote, but a pitch that he can use as his tertiary pitch at a respectable amount of time. Besides the changeup and the fastball, then that could be a perfect scenario for Jonah Tong. So this was more so about trying to get it into a scenario of getting Jonah Tong more comfortable and on the right path for 2025. He goes and adds another pitch in the offseason, and he's back on track to be a starter, full-time starter, come spring training in 2026. But I think the Mets at this point, the rotation, they need to get everybody right, that's struggling right now. But I think Jonah Tong, if there's a way to make him effective for this team and a real contributor down the stretch, given the struggles that he's already produced, maybe it is being one of those, piggyback arms. And I'm not saying for the amount of length that Mania gives you out of the bullpen, because he obviously went 5 innings yesterday, but I'm talking about maybe, 2 innings from Jonah Tong is the perfect sweet spot for him.
Yeah, that could be a big possibility as well. Because, I mean, the best case scenario is all the pitchers get right by the time, the end of the season comes, and you have your abundance of choices when it comes to the postseason. I mean, is that likely? Probably not. We don't get that type of luck as Met fans or with the New York Mets, but it would be nice, right? It would be nice. Dave Peterson has a good start. Again, win or lose, it really doesn't. I mean, it matters, but if David Peterson pitches well and the Mets don't win a game, you're not going to blame David Peterson, but I would like to see what we've seen earlier in the season from David Peterson. I don't know if it's the amount of innings he's thrown back-to-back years that is causing him to, not be as good as he was earlier in the season, because that is something to talk about with David Peterson as well. He's starting today. It's another year where he's thrown well over the innings that he's ever done in his career, and now it's back-to-back coming off of that hip surgery. I wonder if the Mets are concerned about that. I don't think it's injury concern. I think it's just, a little bit of fatigue. And, we know how good he was in the bullpen last year in the playoffs. I do wonder if to not just innings wise, but like just because he was so good last year in the bullpen, would the Mets actually do that? Because, I mean, we can have a conversation all day about who is your 3 starters, in the wild card if the Mets get there. That's a conversation to be had later. But it is interesting because there is a good number of choices, but what is the best combination? Now, matchups probably matter. Who you play probably matters as well. But overall, again, we need to win. So it really doesn't matter how you get to that time of season when it's say, all right, let's set up our rotation for the playoffs. But we all know how this team works. If the pitching does well, there's a really good chance the New York Mets are going to win. And it's just that simple. Like we seen it yesterday. You got 9 innings from Holmes and Mania. And yeah, they got a big lead early on. But Holmes also, we see how many times have we seen this team blow leads when it's like 5-6 nothing. And, when Holmes started to give up those solo home runs, and I'm okay with him throwing the ball over the middle of the plate. You can't walk guys. And I'd rather have a solo home run than a 2 or 3 run homer. But when he started to give up a couple of solo home runs, you're like, uh-oh, when are they going to, let's figure things out here. Let's not make it interesting here. And you notice they made sure they took Holmes out after 4 innings to put Mania in. And again, that was a big risk because if Mania wasn't good, now that whole plan kind of goes up in the air. But luckily, it worked out. And good pitching always helps.
You know what? And we're having this discussion. First of all, there's some discourse in the chat here that I'm seeing piggyback versus tag team. I don't know which one you personally prefer. I think people are asking, you know what? Let's just go with tag team for the sake of the discussion at this point. Who cares
I'll
at
go
this
with that,
point?
yeah.
I would go with the tag team. All right, let's just say there's this tag team, nonsense and stuff that's playing out that we're seeing. It starts to become a trend for the New York Mets. Well, I'll tell you why that's advantageous is because this bullpen. How many guys do you really trust in this bullpen? That's a way to mitigate guys that you don't trust in those high leverage situations. A guy like Ryan Helsley. If a guy like Gregory Soto is falling out of favor, Reed Garrett, there's been a lot of worry about Reed Garrett, since he's come back, that he hasn't really quite looked the same for the better part of the majority of this season. He got off to a really strong start, but he's kind of fizzled out with some overusage. This is a way to, I guess, fix that issue of guys falling out of Mendoza's circle of trust, because as we saw yesterday, I'm not saying it's going to always play out this way, right? Where Manaea is going to give you a full 5 innings, or whoever's coming out of the bullpen in this scenario is going to give you 5 innings, 4 innings. Maybe it might just be 2, maybe it might be 3, it could be 4, who knows? But if you can get at least to the 8th inning, that just shortens the amount of air that Carlos Mendoza will have to work with trying to make a decision in those early, stages of the game, being the 6th and 7th inning, where we've seen leads slip away. He'll probably have to entrust, obviously, Edwin Diaz is the closer. He'll have to find his 8th inning guy. And, whether you entrust that with a guy like, I don't know, Tyler Rogers or whoever it may be, that's a way to mitigate the lack of performances from Ryan Helsley and all the rest of this bullpen that just simply hasn't looked the same, or really hasn't looked the part at all ever since coming over, if you're talking about Ryan Helsley in that situation. So that's why I like the tag team kind of idea beyond just Manaea and Clay Holmes. And that's why I think that role would also be advantageous for Jonah Tong with a guy like Kodai Senga, because you get, hopefully 6 or 7 really solid innings out of those guys, and then you turn it over to your 8th inning guy, whoever Mendoza entrusts in, and then hopefully a bridge to Edwin Diaz. That's a perfect case scenario, but that's why I think it could be a little bit more of a strategic advantage for the Mets to implement on a semi-regular basis, not just that one day with Clay Holmes on the mound.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does make sense because, again, who's in the circle of trust in the bullpen? Like, let me ask you that question. Let's take Diaz out of it, because regardless if he's pitching well or not, he's our 9th inning guy. He's our closer. He's going to pitch. If it's a save situation, he's going to be in there, regardless if he's been bad or good. So let's take Diaz out of it. Right now, who is in your circle of trust on September 17th? 2 weeks before the playoffs start.
I would still say Tyler Rogers. I know that he didn't have a great performance. I think his last time out, or whenever that was, where he kind of gave up a run in the 8th inning. I would say Tyler Rogers is in the circle of trust. Are you talking about the bullpen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, him, Edwin Diaz for sure. Those are the 2 guys that you can definitely, I think, trust. And outside of that, it's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, Reed Garrett, probably not at this point. He kind of makes me a little bit nervous. I've always been a Reed Garrett fan, but I'm not sure I trust in him. With the control issues of Gregory Soto, I'm going to say no to him too. Manaea is there, but I think that we're already slating him as a long relief guy. We're not talking about, the later stages of the game for like a 1 inning type of role. Limited options. I mean, anybody that you can think of that I didn't just name with those 2 guys?
You didn't say Stanek, did you?
No. I'm good. I know that he's had a couple of scoreless outings the last go. I'm not trusting that guy. No thanks.
Yeah, I think the veteran and the postseason experience, I think you're going to see him out. And
Rayleigh. Okay, good point. Rayleigh. Brooks Rayleigh is also in the circle of trust. For sure. 100%.
Rayleigh for sure.
Yep.
But you know what? I honestly think the Mets have to figure out Helsley. Like, I know he's not trusted. You're gonna have to figure out what you're gonna do with him, because either he's gonna be buried in the bullpen and not on the postseason roster, but you need to find that out, because right now he sucks. Right? He's been a tad bit better. I mean, it's hard to be worse than what he already was, but you can't have that type of arm and that type of, the way his stuff works. it plays in the postseason, swing and miss stuff, and just the pure power that he throws with. That is usually needed in the playoffs. But again, you can't just throw him out there because he throws fast and he misses. He's supposed to miss bats. You can't trust that. But what do you do over the next 11 games? Do you use Helsley in bigger spots? Even, again, they're just going to bury him for the rest of the season? Like, I think you have to find out. I mean, it's hard to say because, again, you got to win games. And I'm not against not pitching them. Like, if you want to not pitch them, what are you going to do? You got to win ball games by any means necessary. But I still feel like they believe in Helsley. And I think Helsley can be a huge piece to this bullpen because if he figures it out, and there's your 8th inning guy, now you got Rogers and Raley for your 6th and 7th, and now you have a combination of what you thought you were going to have when you first traded for all these guys for your bullpen. So, like, what do you do with Helsley? Because it's obviously a problem. That is a huge, waste of an arm in the bullpen because he's talented. We know the stuff he has, but he's been so bad. Better as I'm not going to say better, but okay lately, but it's been in weird situations where it's like, you can afford to pitch him. What do you think about Helsley overall? Like, what are they going to do with him?
I mean, if it was a different circumstance, let's say the Mets were like 5 games up, 6 games up, then I'm like, yeah, keep trying it because there's a lot of room for error there. But it's a game and a half right now. I mean, the Diamondbacks might just win in the bottom of the 10th here. We're keeping an eye out on that score because the Giants failed to score at the top of the 10th. I think that you can't really afford to try to work him back into these higher leverage, innings with this season and this playoff spot being so close and on the line. I think that would be kind of borderline malpractice because he's shown you what he's been as a New York Met. And to just hope and pray that he shows you something different. I mean, how often were they talking about, and we were talking about, this whole, tipping of pitches nonsense. Like that was going to solve all of his issues. And so, yeah, he's looked better, I guess. I mean, his last outing was okay. He provided a scoreless inning, if I'm not mistaken. He still got roughed up in Philadelphia, the outing before that. You know what I mean? So I don't trust this guy. I'm sorry. I don't trust this guy at all. And I don't think that he's shown me enough, personally speaking, to entrust him down the stretch of this season with 11 games left in a high leverage situation. It's pros and cons. The pro would be, let's say he does show himself to be competent. You get an arm that is now confident and surging into the playoffs, which is what you had originally hoped for when you traded him, for him. But the con is he blows games for you. You lose as a result, and you don't make the playoffs. I mean, that's really what it is. Trust level for me is not there. I would have to imagine the trust level of Carlos Mendoza in him is not there either. So I just don't think that we'll see him in these big spots much moving forward, unfortunately, especially when you have Rogers, Raley, and Diaz as those 3 guys. And so I just think it's a risky move to try to insert him back and force feed him with the hope of him just turning it around completely 180.
Well, Easy brings up a good point in the chat, and I kind of agree with him, but obviously it's a situation where, and I'll put it right, you have to use Helsley or you wear out Rogers and Raley down the stretch. I mean, that's a possibility. Like, it's I know Mendoza has been using Raley a little bit more back-to-back days. Rogers is a rubber arm, but we saw what happened when we used Rogers day after day after day. He kind of started to give up, even though those were soft hits. He started to not miss bats, and the ball was getting put in play. Yeah, there was soft contact, but he was giving up hits. He was giving up runs, and Raley has been really good. But again, you don't know how Raley's going to react pitching so much over these last couple of days. Like, you're going to pitch him back to back. He's going to, are you going to use him 3 straight days if possible? Like, because there's not a lot of trusted guys. You know what's going to happen today? Because we're talking about it. Helsley will be in like the 7th inning. It'll be a 1-run game. Either the Mets are up or the Mets are down, or it's a tie game. And he's going to come into the ball game because I truly believe they want to be so right on Helsley, win or lose. I think they want to make sure that he is. They need to know because again, you got to win ball games, and I'd rather put Helsley in a clean inning. Like, give him the 3 batters if he's terrible, take him out. I think don't put him in a situation where you'll have runners on base. I think that's a dangerous game to play because you have no idea what you're going to get for him. But bring him in a clean inning. Like let's say David Peterson goes 5 innings. Obviously the score is going to dictate what happens. But let's say throwing him in the 6th inning. Would you do that? Let's say the game is tied. 6th inning.
I mean, yeah. I mean,
because that's the only time
sure.
you can use them. Because blowout games, regardless if the Mets are winning or losing, it's not going to change anything. Like just because he might pitch well in a blowout doesn't make me any more confident to put him in a low scoring or in a tight game.
I would just keep him on a super, super, super short leash. I mean, I'm talking about if he gives up the first couple of base runners, you have to have the mindset if you're Mendoza that you are going to utilize Helsley, and then you have your backup option, whether it's a guy like Gregory Soto or whoever else coming out of the bullpen immediately in the first sign of trouble, because Helsley is not a guy that can work himself out of jams. Like if there's a guy that gets on base, via the walk, right? Maybe two, because he does have control issues. Again, his location is just absolutely horrible. You have to have a quick trigger if you're Carlos Mendoza. You can't get cute. So I would be for putting him in situations where it's still quote unquote high leverage, but maybe not so much in the game. 6th inning compared to like an 8th inning situation. But I say this at the first sign of trouble, there's no letting him work out of it anymore. There's no trust in that phase. He either gets the first couple of outs and cruises his way to an easy inning, or if he gets in trouble, he's done and you yank him. So it's a tough situation. Like I said, my question to you is, I mean, at this point, with the way that, all things consistent with the way that both trajectories have gone, who do you trust more at this point, Reed Garrett or Ryan Helsley? Who do you trust?
Unfortunately for the Mets and Mendoza, they got to use one of them because, again, you can't go to the same guys that we just talked about every single day. It's an impossible situation. Rarely is your best lefty, obviously, but you can't use him 3 straight days because you got lefties coming up. You got to use Soto, unfortunately, even though he hasn't been good. So between Garrett and Helsley, I would think because Mendoza probably, because he had Garrett over the last year and a half, 2 years, I feel like he probably would go the Reed Garrett, but I still think they're still in this mindset of Helsley being the key to a successful bullpen down the stretch, the last couple of games and the postseason. I find it hard to believe, regardless if Helsley is pitching well or not, he's going to be off the postseason roster. I think they love that arm too much. And unfortunately, I don't like that idea, but that was your biggest trade. That was your biggest trade at the deadline. I find it hard to believe that they're just not going to they're just going to wait for blowout games and games that don't matter, because the score is crazy to get them in a game, because that's not solving anything. So in a Reed Garrett situation, again, we'll bring up the 6th inning again. You could easily throw Reed Garrett in the 6th inning, right? 5 innings from Peterson, 6th inning, fresh inning. Why not just use Helsley? Like, Garrett hasn't pitched well. I don't trust him either. I mean, we really don't trust Helsley, but you got to get one of them right. You can't have the situation where there is nobody, like literally Ryan Stanek has been better than
I would
Reed
trust
Garrett.
him. I was just going to say I would trust him more than the other two guys at this point, as
But
crazy
I
as
think
that
the Mets
sounds, as
already
much
do
as I've
trust
shitted
Ryan
on
Stanek.
him.
I think they see Ryan Stanek as a guy who didn't pitch well when they first got him last year. And towards September into the postseason, he was our best reliever, one of our best relievers.
He came alive for
Well,
sure.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think they believe that can happen, or that will happen again with Ryan Stanek. And we've seen, what is it, the last 4 outings has been damn good. And he's the one reason why we actually got that win to break up a losing streak. So you could use Ryan Stanek, but if Ryan Stanek is now in the circle of trust, let's say, with Raley and Rogers, along with Diaz, wouldn't you have to figure out which other guy? Because I think you need at least 4 or 5 guys just to be on the safe side, where you can go to those guys you feel like you can go at any moment. And Reed Garrett and Helsley aren't those guys right now. At least the 6th inning, if they happen to blow up, again, the 3 batter rule. If they put a couple of guys on base with the 3 batter rule, get him out right after the third batter. That's the only thing you can do to hopefully save that inning. But you got to try one of them, because if you
This
don't,
is
you're going to be going into a questionable situation the last couple of games of the year, hopefully into the playoffs.
This is why the idea, if you have Brandon Sproat and he continues to prove himself, this is why the idea of David Peterson being a bullpen arm is not the worst thing in the world, because this
Correct.
solves a big, big situation and a big need. Because at that point, I would say, depending on where the opposing lineup is at in their batting order, you have your immediate quote unquote lockdown, or at least more lockdown than any of these guys that we're talking about right now, with the exception of Edwin Diaz, right? Um, is coming in for the seventh or the eighth inning to try to get the game to Edwin Diaz. That's why I think that David Peterson could find himself back into that role. And like you said to begin this stream, everything is fluid with the Mets right now. I don't think that they're committed to anybody in this rotation minus Nolan McLean at this very moment. Like, everybody else can serve a different purpose. And that's just the fact of the matter. And so they'll have to make a decision on what's best for the team. But if we're having this conversation right now, I do think that David Peterson, whether you want to believe it or not, again, it seems crazy to me when we were talking about it. I told you I thought that David Peterson is going to be penciled in for a rotation start, in a 3-game set. But if he's not, if it's a big word, if he's not, then he solves this situation that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, and to finish up the last couple of minutes of the stream, we'll talk about the lineup really quickly. Right, the lineup was really good yesterday. It's basically the same lineup except for no Vientos, and you got Marte in the DH spot behind Brandon Nimmo. I don't like Marte behind Brandon Nimmo. I don't like Brandon Nimmo in the 4-hole. But again, the lineup scored 8 runs yesterday, minus Vientos in this lineup. What do you think of this lineup? And what about Cedric Mullins, by the way, who's looking like he's swinging a little bit of a better bat? I know we hit a home run yesterday. Nothing special. Like I don't know if you're gonna trust him, but he is gonna be a guy in center field, I think, in game one. And the Giants just took the lead, which is, I'd rather have the Giants win that game, by the way. That just, it helps us, because if we win today, we gain a game on the Diamondbacks, by the way. So yeah, Chris, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'd rather see the Giants win as well. 100%. So, I mean, I like the lineup. Again, with the way that Soto and Alonso are performing right now, um, the rest of the guys around them have to make sure that they are getting on base for these guys coming up. And that includes Cedric Mullins flipping the lineup over. Lindor also swung a really good bat yesterday. It was really good to see. I do think that sometimes Cedric Mullins is trying to be the power hitter that he's not and has not been in a Mets uniform. He hit 16, 17 home runs in the first half in a Baltimore Orioles uniform. That's all fine and great. But when you are a number 9 hitter in a lineup on a Mets team that flips the lineup over to Lindor, Soto, and Alonso, I would be a little bit more inclined, if I'm Chavez or Barnes, and tell him, please shorten up your swing, because that seems to be their philosophy no matter what. Shorten up your swing and get on base. Draw a walk if you have to. You have the green light for a stolen base. You can steal bases too. I think Mullins would be the perfect number 9 hole hitter, right? Tyrone Taylor also is one of the more, I guess, idealistic 9-hole hitters with the speed combination and his ability to get on base. That's fine. But I think Cedric Mullins is trying to be something he's not right now. Yes, he did put one over the fence. It was good to see yesterday, but that's coming few and far between. The amount of baseballs that he hits to the gap and over the fence is few and far between. The same thing when we were talking about earlier this season with Luis Angel Acuna trying to be something he's not with that big swing. It's like, just know your role at this point on the team, especially with where you're batting at in the order in relation to the big guys that are the third duo in Mets franchise history to put up 35 plus home runs apiece, with Soto at 40 plus and Alonso at 35 plus, approaching 40. It's not rocket science, I think. So wishful thinking would be thinking that Mullins is going to automatically snap out of it and continue to hit for a higher OPS, extra base hits and home runs. That's not what he's supposed to be doing on this team. I'm sure the Mets weren't really thinking of him as being an addition that's going to add to the slugging, quote unquote, of this team, rather than helping this team in a way that he can use his legs and just get on base and come around to score with the other guys in the lineup. So again, I have no problems with this lineup. Brett Baty also batting seventh, coming off of a really solid game with the bat, another home run, up to 17 on the season. It's been really good to see Brett Baty getting that, power stroke, so to speak, 15 plus home runs. This is the production at the bare minimum that we were expecting when Brett Baty first got called up. We know and we knew that he didn't really have like 25 plus home run potential, but like 15, 20 plus home runs was definitely up the alley of Brett Baty. And we're starting to see that come to fruition. And he's playing solid defense as well, whether it's second base or third base. And that's really good to see. So that's my thoughts and opinions about the bottom of the lineup. First and foremost, just get on base if you're in the bottom of the lineup and flip the lineup over. That's the recipe for success, especially with the way that the first three guys are hitting right now and the pace that they're on.
Absolutely. And you know what, Brett Baty, the Mets are 18 games over 500 when Brett Baty's in the lineup. So that's a huge stat. Like, he's been absolutely outperforming every guy that everybody wanted him over. Let's be honest about that. I mean, this guy was back in the minor leagues a couple of months ago. So great to see Brett Baty doing his thing, and hopefully this lineup puts up more runs and helps David Peterson out. Let's get something going with David Peterson as well, showing a little bit more trust that we can get from him when we think about who we're going to start going forward over the last 11 games of the season. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Amazing Mets pregame show right here on the channels and on X. Chris, you doing a post game?
If I get back home in time, I will try to set it up in time. I'm not as confident that I can do a post game as confident as I was yesterday, and it actually did happen. So be on the lookout. But at the bare minimum, we will be, Telly, doing a tag team post game tomorrow after the matinee game. So keep an eye out for that. So I'll try to do a pregame tomorrow as well. It's just busy scheduling, but at the very minimum, you will get a post game tomorrow. Keep an eye out on the post game tonight, but I would probably call it maybe like a 30-70 chance in favor of no post game today. But again, stranger things have happened.
All right, guys. So enjoy the game in about an hour from now. Let's go Mets, and let's win 3 in a row, guys. Have a good night, and let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.
Seven train rumble, headed to the field. Orange and blue vibes, the energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, repping both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire, misunderstood. Hear 'em all loud, let the anthem flow.